All right, aloha, friends. Happy Wednesday. It's Brian Gossett with Game Time with the Goss, presented by GM Sports Media, Get Recruited websites. Another episode here. Happy to be joined with my man, the Chocolate Bear, Kenny Matthews with Friday Night Glory. First off, thanks, Kenny, for jumping on. But first question here. We've been covering a lot of football, a lot of great players. But if you can only go back 10 years, only land you do the last decade, if you had to pick one high school quarterback to build a new team around, who you picking?
First, man, I can't believe you got up to 20 episodes now on this deal. Nice work, man. I was on the first one and got 19 more in after, man. I guess you are going to stick around for a while,
Appreciate
huh? Good deal. Man, this was an easy question. When you sent it to me last night, I don't even have to think about it. Kyler Murray, no question. That dude was phenomenal. He had video game speed and he refused to lose ball games. That would be the guy that I would definitely want to have. If I had to pick a team around, that would be the number one guy draft. And you don't even have to go 10 years. You probably can go 30 years as far as I'm concerned. That guy was phenomenal. He won with his legs, he won with his arm, and he won with his grit. And I mean, yes, he had some talent around him, no question. But I think if he stayed in Louisville might have a couple of state championships too. So I'm not going to say the reason he won is because of the talent now. I just think he had the will to win, and that guy he was a pleasure to watch. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. My first year was 2014, but it was Kyler's senior year. So I wish I had seen him another year or two. But when I was coming up with this question, Kyler Murray was the first that came to mind. Also, name that popped up was more recently. I thought maybe Jackson Arnold, especially the way he played his senior year. I thought maybe he'd be in the conversation as well.
I was thinking of Jaquindon Jackson at Duncanville too. Was another one that I was thinking of. I mean, obviously he got hurt, against Rockwall in the, state semis, and that kind of made me think maybe not. But yeah, Jackson Arnold was a really good one because I mean, you and I both were there when he got thrust into the playing as a true freshman. I
He
think
was thrown in the fire.
yeah, throw it in the fire. I think he threw what 7 passes for the whole year, and he's got to come in and play against the vaunted Westlake team. But from that progression then to what he was his junior year when he got back to state, and then obviously even last year. I mean, I know it didn't end well against DeSoto. That guy really just grew right in front of our eyes, big time, and now playing for the good guys up there in Norman now. So I'm very happy. But that's a good call, Goss. I do like Jackson Arnold one. I didn't really think of that one, but that would be a top 5 for me for sure.
Sorry, I'm kind of gonna date you here, kind of put an age on you, but you were a football player. You graduated from Newman Smith back in the '80s. Aside from sort of the obvious, the safety, how the safety has changed in football, I was just interested to know what was it like back then in the '80s. Obviously there's more teams now, but who are some of your district teams you're playing, and you know, were you still doing one or two teams making the playoffs back then?
It was 2 teams that made the playoffs then, and we're thrust in a district with Duncanville, the Irving schools, and South Grand Prairie, and R.L. Turner was
Okay.
ours. So Duncanville was
Nothing,
kind
nothing too
of
crazy. Some
yeah,
of these
but
they'll,
they
they'll
were
go out. They'll go out super west or super south. Like, what are they doing?
but the thing about it is the Irving schools were really good back then. I mean, MacArthur was extremely good. Irving was very good, and even Nimitz was very good. They had 2 running backs, Trigg and Stewart, who both played in Division I football back then. They were extremely good. Duncanville was the cream of the crop of that team. They had Bam Morris and Barry Foster, a couple of pros, obviously, for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the day. And the thing that I think that's the biggest thing that was the biggest difference between that era and now is the passing game. The passing game. If you had 15 attempts in a game, or 20 attempts in a game. That seemed to be a large number, back then. Heck, you can have 15 to 20 attempts now in the first quarter, for some teams now. So the weightlifting obviously has changed. I mean, we did weightlifting, as a team, but I don't think a lot of guys did personal weight training and, things of that nature on their own. I think that it might be one of the reasons why a lot of guys now seem to be coming up with injuries now, because they're overtraining a little bit now, because they're training around the clock. But the weightlifting it's specialization in weightlifting it's not even on the same stratosphere as it was for us back then. I mean, if you lifted weights, you had to have somebody spot you. You had to do things like that. It was very, very primitive. One thing that I thought about when you asked me this question last night, the biggest difference, we played on natural grass. I mean, there was no turf. I mean, we
Everyone's
played
got
on
turf now.
grass. Yeah, everything's turf now. I mean, I'm blessed that we played on grass. I couldn't. I remember when Clark Stadium opened. As a matter of fact, this is a story that I hadn't told a lot of people. I was at Trinity Christian Academy as a ninth grader, and I got to play on the varsity team, and we scrimmaged Plano East, who was the first year of Plano East, and they had just a junior and sophomores, on their varsity team. And we got to play at Clark Stadium, and they just put in natural grass. Man, we were so excited to play on this. We thought we were going to be, all these fast athletes and everything. It took about 10 minutes for us to realize how hot it was. And then it took me about 15 minutes when I got tackled and I had all these raspberries on my elbow to say, I don't like turf. So it was really strange. But yeah, I mean, playing on natural grass, I think we were blessed to have that. And I think the biggest thing is the speed. The speed of the game is just it's not even the same. I mean, where we had maybe one or two guys that were really fast back in our day, now you got 6 or 7 guys that are fast. And you got offensive linemen that are fast. You got defensive linemen that are fast, linebackers that are fast. I mean, it just wasn't that kind of game back then. It really wasn't. It was a more physical game when I played than it is now. I mean, it really was. I mean, then coaches are allowed to kind of coach us harder. We weren't in the, let's say, woke world that we live in right now. So if the coach said you did something, you did it. There's some benefits in that. And there, obviously there, for the betterment of the game, it's not that way anymore. I mean, I can remember only having 2 water breaks, at 3:15 starting practice, and we went till 6:30. We had just 2 water breaks. I mean, maybe it made you tougher. Maybe some people live in the old school thinking that it was a better game back then than it is. I just think it was a more physical game back then. It's definitely not a better game back in the 80s than it is now. It's more entertaining now. And the passing game is really the reason for that.
And you didn't have overtimes, right?
No, man, you had penetrations,
Yeah,
baby. I mean, it was penetrations, and if both teams had penetrations, it went to first downs.
yeah.
If you had the same amount of first downs, it went to total yards. So, I mean,
If there was one thing that just like kind of fascinates me is those rules right there back then.
it was crazy. I mean, I can remember, getting home on bus rides from games or whatever and hearing about, well, this team won because they got 5 penetrations and the other team got stopped at the 32-yard line. So it stopped them from getting another penetration to
Yeah,
tie, to the set. I mean, you had really, really good football teams in, 50 plus years or whatever it was with the penetration rule in that didn't make the playoffs when it was just one and done because of penetrations. Can you imagine that now? It's just, and we just accepted it like no big deal.
I would have loved to see like the full list of tiebreakers.
Yes.
Like if you go all the way down to maybe the 10th tiebreaker, what was that or something? I mean, I wonder if like at the end of the day, it's like let's just do a coin flip.
Well, I would love. I mean, we used to. Maybe it was just because we lived in the metroplex. We used to hear about all the great stories of the penetrations and first downs out in West Texas. It was a big euphoria type deal back in the '70s and the '80s about West Texas football, Midland Lee and Midland and Odessa, and they're
Yeah,
playing these just dramatic games, and it would be tied you know, in there. And then you would have all these kind of like, not really riots, but you know, you had cities that got turned upside down a little bit because of that. And I can't imagine how you can console your football team because maybe you got 385 yards total yards and the other team got 380, and that's the reason why you're not advancing. That's beyond bizarre to me now.
We're here with Kenny Matthews of Friday Night Glory. You just did 12 years with FNG. Congratulations on that. So, a
Thank
lot
you,
of
sir.
games, a lot of players. I've asked our buddies Nolan Ruth this and Mark Henry, and I'm wondering if you're going to go in the same direction. What's the best game you've covered?
It has to be 2019, Galena Park and Duncanville. If you were there, the electricity in that stadium when Longview won prior to the game before, and it was probably about 45,000 people in that stadium then for the Longview game, and then Duncanville and Galena Park came on after that. It's something that I've not felt since. You know, even as good as the last three, the between Galena Park and Duncanville games have been, it just you had a feeling something was there. And I think that the one thing that I draw back besides the pass is that when North Shore is driving for that last drive, if you remember, it's about 16 or 17 seconds left in the game. They get a holding call when they're on like the 31 or the 32-yard line of Duncanville at that time. I still think if you don't get that holding call, you really can't do. There's never been a better time to get a proper, you know, jump ball scenario then because you don't have enough yards to really throw the ball up in the air and try to go get a jump ball at that point in time. This is one time I think that Coach Keys is probably thinking, thank you for the holding call. You know, I mean, how many offensive guys are going to say thank you for an offensive holding call, but they got it and it gave them enough room. And just the pure shock, you know, for me it's shock, then it's elation, then it's dejection. I mean, it was just unreal, just the feeling. You know, I've just never had that buzz go through my bones before in a game like that. And obviously, they played three great classics since that point in time. We had no idea that this was going to be the start of a, you know, civil war almost between those two teams, but it was just extraordinary. And not only that, the reaction of those players, you know, those North Shore players, 30 minutes afterwards. I mean, you just saw that look in their face that they knew they just stole the state championship against Duncanville. Yeah, it's just really eerie to kind of really describe, but that's the best game, obviously, for me. There's no question to me, and I don't even think there's a close second.
Yeah, that was 2018. Longview beating Westbrook, first title in like 80 years, and then they follow up with that Hail Mary pass. Yeah, it was crazy because the guy that caught the touchdown in the end zone, I think, didn't he end up hurting something, getting injured?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, I was surprised that he was still breathing after that dog pal that was playing
Yeah.
afterwards. You know? I
I mean, all his, all,
mean,
all his teammates, all the media guys on top of him.
I mean, the band, you know, I mean, it was, and I can remember, I believe it was Riley that interviewed him for us for Friday Night Glory afterwards. You know, he was just so out of breath. You know, I mean, you could just tell that every ounce of energy that he put into that to make the play. And you know, and you remember this. There's two Duncanville defensive backs right there that can make the play on him. I mean, that's you know, that's the one telling thing that I can kind of remember because I told the guy next to me, I think it was Nick Harris, I said, well, it's not over till it's not over. But I said, you know, all Duncanville has to do is just, if it's close, get a pass interference. You know, it puts it at the 1.5 yard line, you know, and it's only one play. I just couldn't believe that they didn't make a play on the ball. That was just so bizarre to me. But yeah, what a game. I mean, I'll never forget it. That's for sure.
And yeah, just kind of seeing Coach Sample's just reaction in his face, man, kind of breaks your heart. You know, you
Yes.
thought that was going to be the one.
Do you know? I will say this. One thing I will say about Coach Samples, and I said this last year when he did win his national and when he won his state championship. he was the same way in those press conferences, those three tough losses, as he was when he won it last year. And that goes a lot to a man to be that way. He was humble. He was always very contrite. He was always giving, North Shore props for them, Coach Keys, the whole time. And he was the exact same way he was last year in that thrilling win that he had last year, too. So major props to him.
Asked Henry this last week, but give me a percentage out of 100%. Duncanville will repeat as state champ.
I'm going to go 50-50. And the reason I say 50-50 is because this is the first time that Duncanville now is, they got the bullseye on their back this time. They've been the huntee for the last 3 years, trying to get that state championship. Now North Shore is sitting down there in Houston going, we want this back now. So I think that it is a 50-50 proposition because it's, we say this, it's very hard to repeat. I know South Oak Cliff repeated last year. I know Galena Park has repeated repeatedly. I know Westlake has repeated, but that's not the norm. Generally things happen, they generally happen for a state champion to come back next year and try to win it again. It's really, really difficult. So, props to obviously Coach Todd for being able to do that last year. It's just very hard. And a lot of times you got to have the football guys kind of go your way too. You got to keep your quarterback clean, or your great running back or your great defensive player. Play 16 games, the odds of that happening is not very good. So, but yes, Duncanville is extremely talented. I mean, I think that they're probably the most talented team in the state. Maybe DeSoto can give them a run on that. But it's going to be very hard for them to do. But this is a position that Duncanville hadn't been in many, 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 many years. So it'd be very interesting. But I'll put 50-50 on that. Even though Galena Park does have a new coach. That's new. That's a new thing that they're going to have to be battling with themselves. But they get the Bailey kid back, so that will really help them at quarterback.
Yeah, DFW had a great December last year. The top 4 state champs from DFW: Duncanville, DeSoto, Aledo, and Sauk.
Not bad.
How would you rank them in terms of repeating? 1 being the best chance to repeat, and 4 being the least. And I mean, do you think there's a surprise team that we're overlooking here in DFW?
Yeah, I think there is a couple teams, and I also think it's going to go who's going to be Division I or Division II. And one of my sleeper teams might be North Crowley. Coach Gates did an outstanding job with them last year. If Trinity and Bell make the playoffs next year, they're Division II. They're not Division I. So I mean, they're in Division II. DeSoto, look out. It could be really, really interesting in a game like that. And if I had to rank them, I would probably say South Oak Cliff is number 4. And I hate to say that because but they only have one returner on defense. They graduated, I believe, the most Division I players last year from their roster. You got 32 sacks that graduated last year, and their 2 defensive linemen. The Brandon Jones and UNT commit is the only returning starter on defense. Now, don't get me wrong, Coach Todd. I know you have talented guys there. They're just unproven right now. And to try to make a three-peat with an unproven defense, I think the odds are kind of stacked up against you on that. I really do. I think offensively they're going to be really good. They got an extremely tough non-district schedule, which will help them get better because I don't think that the district really prepares them for the playoffs, week after week. So I'd probably put them at number 4. I probably would put this is a tough one. I didn't know which one to go with, either Aledo or DeSoto at 3. So I'm going to go with DeSoto. I'm just going to say that just on the odds of trying to repeat. I think Aledo may have an easier path to repeat. That I know they'll have to go through Longview again, probably down the road. Maybe even a Mansview, Timberview, depending on if that all-world Corin, he can change the game whenever he wants to, Mansview, Timber. But they got a new coach also, so that might not elevate them farther than what they were last year. Then I would probably go with DeSoto at number 2. DJ Bailey, I think he had the best year that nobody's ever talking about. 45 TDs and just 2 interceptions, 3,800 yards passing. And the thing I think about DJ Bailey that goes really unnoticed, he's a lot more athletic than he looks. They do that RPO stuff, and it seems like when he keeps the ball, he just moves the chains an awful lot. They're loaded with Tyler Ridden behind them. Their offensive line, their defensive line are just extremely good. I think they are the second most talented team by just a little bit, to Duncanville in the area to me. Then obviously I put Duncanville. We kind of said reasons why they're absolutely loaded with January and Dobson and Simmons and Durham, and Corey Moore, and the list goes on with Russell and those guys. And I think the reason why Duncanville is really so good is because they've got competitive practices. Their second and third string guys are not bad. So, I mean, you're going up against good competition every time you step on the football field. But if I had a sleeper, I would think would be in 6A would be Louisville. I think Louisville, their offensive line is mammoth. They got a 3-year starter in Ethan Terrell at quarterback. They got Byron Ellison, who's been a 3-year guy there. I mean, the back end's got Hardy and Nukumba. I thought they might have been a year early last year with their success. They lose to Prosper, I believe it's 24-13 in the regional finals, I believe it was last year. I really think that they're going to be extremely good. They got the Fasasi kid, the potential 5-star 2025 guy. This is Coach Older's 7th year, and he's really brought that program from being just very mediocre to below mediocre. So now they're a perennial power, and they play a really physical style of football, which I think that's the way you have to try to beat Duncanville. I don't think you can just kind of out-scheme Duncanville. You got to kind of line them up and move them off the line of scrimmage, and that's the reason why I think North Shore's had so much success against Duncanville, because they can meet their physicality. But I think Louisville's the one Matt Diggs said it yesterday or the other day. He said he thinks that they have the best offensive line in the state. I think maybe Austin Vanderjet may have the best line in the offense state. But if they're not the best, they're 1B. So they're pretty good. So I think that Louisville and I would say North Crowley are kind of my 2 sleepers.
Is there someone that could give Sox a run?
Good question. That is a really, really good. I didn't really think too much about the 4A side of it. That's a really good question, huh?
5A.
5A. Let me think. Well, I would think that the Lone Stars and the Reedy, I think both of them are really, really good on that aspect, on that side of the football. I think Lone Star is going to be very good offensively. They got a really good defensive tackle on their side of the ball. Reedy's going to be really good. They had some graduation, but they got some really good running backs there for Reedy. If you had to really pick somebody in that realm, I would think that probably let's see.
Maybe a Mansfield Summit.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Mansfield Summers is another one. I mean, got who's the quarterback for them? Is it Smith?
Is it Joseph Williams?
Joseph Williams. I've been reading my Dave Campbell's and I'm getting my names mixed up, but I think Summit could be kind of a surprise team. I think that, they've been kind of on the periphery for the last 4 or 5 years of being really, really good. And I think that they have the talent to make a good run, in the playoffs for sure. But that's a good call. I kind of like the Mansfield Summit.
And maybe even Lucas Lovejoy.
Well, I was going to say, you got Lovejoy, you got, I think Lovejoy, and you got Melissa on the,
in that region.
Nigel, yeah, you got Hollaback and Nigel Smith from Melissa. I mean, and Lovejoy, you got Parker Livingston, the UT commit that's going at wide receiver. I mean, I don't think people talk enough about Lovejoy and Melissa. And I don't enough myself. I don't think, but all they're doing out there is cranking out wins out there. And it wouldn't surprise me if Lovejoy makes another run like they did a couple years back when they got to I believe it was the regional finals. I believe it was when they had the Rucker kid for them. Yeah, they're going to be really tough out, and I really think Melissa, their offense and defensive line are just loaded. So I think they can win those December game. I mean, excuse me, November games, as that we call it. If it is cold outside, they don't have to pass the ball. They can just load up, knock people off the line of scrimmage, and win ball games that way, running the football. So yeah, I think Lovejoy and Melissa are two of definitely to watch for sure.
And get you off the list, but I don't know if you got your schedule up already, but what a couple of games you're looking forward to see this year, or a couple players you're looking forward to go watch?
Well, it's going to be easy for me. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone in the first game at McKinney this year. I'm going to get to see Longview and McKinney play this year. Get to see Brian Williams, the U.S. commit, the running back, and get to see Taylor Tatum, the running back committed to OU. Both of them are top 10 running backs in the nation, not just Texas, but in the nation going up against each other. Both of them are going to you're going to see them probably carry the ball 25 plus times a game for both teams. And the reason I do like this game is because McKinney plays an old style kind of football. They lost Mr. Luster last year, but to get the North Garland transfer to come in this year to replace him, they're going to try to run the football. They're going to kind of go back to my era a little bit. They're going to try to knock you off the line of scrimmage, play field position games. And Longview's going to do the same thing too, because they lost some pieces on offense last year. Their defense is going to be very good this year. But I think that when you have a horse like Tatum and you have a horse like Williams in the backfield, they take care of all the warts, that you may have early. So that's going to be a nice tilt, because I think McKinney could be a surprise this year. I think in that district for them this year, I think they have a shot at, maybe going 2 or 3 rounds deep in the playoffs because of that. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm going to look forward to see a Duncanville game this year with Colin Simmons. I mean, Colin Simmons arguably maybe the best player in the nation. He is he's unblockable. And it's not fair that he has Alex January, the UT committed defensive end, to keep him having one-on-one situations most of the year. This is an abundance of riches for the Duncanville Panthers. And Colin Simmons is just, as you saw, he was the MVP in the game last year in the state championship game. He's just a horse. I mean, I've not seen anybody to be that kind of unblockable in a very, very long time. I need to think about it a little bit more. I need to find out who reminds me of Colin Simmons. I know I've seen him before in the last 10 to 12 years, but I just hadn't been able to put it in the KBDI, the Kenny's Ball Dome Index yet. But I'll let you know when it comes back up. But man, he's wonderful to watch. I mean, and I really want to see how the Russell kid plays this year. I thought that he really stabilized Duncanville last year, halfway through the season at the quarterback position. Obviously, he's going to be able to throw to Corian Moore, who's probably arguably the best wide receiver in the nation in 2025. And you got Kay Durham behind him. So, I mean, you've got a lot of high-end guys, that you could watch for Duncanville. But Colin Simmons definitely is going to take the cake on that.
Well, enjoy the season, Kenny, and I'm sure we'll see you at some games. Appreciate you taking the time, brother.
And it's always a pleasure, man. Keep putting out that material, buddy. You're writing like crazy. Love it. Love it, love it, love it on.
Awesome. That's Kenny Matthews with the Chocolate Bear, Friday Night Glory. And I'm Brian Gossett, Game Time with the Goss. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and check out the website, gmsportsmedia.com. Until then, we'll see you next time, and enjoy the rest of your week. Aloha.